The book basically moves throughout history, telling vignettes about how water has been managed. And one of the most interesting aspects of this is early New York. So the Dutch, as everyone knows, first settled Manhattan Island, and they built a fort, and they dug some wells, some shallow wells. There was a pond actually called the Collect, which was nearby where they got most of their water. But they did not build any wells in their fort, and they didn't really give much thought to this until the English came up and besieged them, and they realized very quickly they had no water. And so they abandoned the fort, and Peter Stuyvesant wrote back to his masters back in Amsterdam not to worry about it because the English would run out of water as well, so we could always come back. So one of the very first things the English do is to dig a lot of wells. And essentially, for the first 100 years or so of Manhattan, of New York, that's not a problem. But as the city gets more and more populated, pollution becomes a real issue. And this place called the Collect, where most people have been getting their water, just becomes incredibly polluted. In fact, there's a wonderful story. Rodney Dangerfield would have loved this. A guy called Peter Kalm, who was a Swede who was visiting, he wrote that the water from the Collect was so awful that horses from out of town refused to drink it. And so the governments of New York City, the council, realizes this is a problem. And so they start issuing bonds. This is actually the first money ever issued by a city in America. It's called waterworks money. This is just before the Revolutionary War. They issue this money to get capital to build an entire water infrastructure, and they start building it. But then the Revolutionary War breaks out. The British come into New York and they destroy all the waterworks. And so nothing happens then for another 25, 30 years. The Collect is still awful and getting worse. So what happens in a really sort of bizarre twist of fate is that Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton team forces to try to create a company that will provide water to New Yorkers. It's called the Manhattan Company. Now this is the same Aaron Burr who 8 years later will kill Alexander Hamilton in a duel. But they started off as business partners. So Burr goes to the legislature in Albany, upstate New York, and he persuades them, with Alexander Hamilton's help, to pass a law that gives all these powers to the Manhattan Company, essentially the ability to raise $2 million in exchange for providing what is called pure and wholesome water. So they get this charter from the state legislature. Only Burr is a very clever guy. In fact, conniving might be a better word to describe him, because he has no intention of using this money to get water for New York. What he wants to do is to operate a bank, but without the strictures of a regular bank charter. And so he takes only 10% of the $2 million that he's raised, and he essentially pipes water from the Collect to New Yorkers. He takes the rest of the money and he invests it as a bank, which in this organization becomes the Chase Manhattan Bank. And if you look at the logo of the Chase Manhattan Bank, it actually, I can't really show it with my fingers, but essentially it is the cross-section of a wooden pipe, which shows its origins. And in fact, the Chase Manhattan Bank was worried about losing its charter, so it continued actually to pump water until the early 1900s.